Fixing a game like League sounds very easy, but League is like an ecosystem. Simply tweaking an item can either buff or nerf a lot of champions. If suddenly a champion becomes almost unplayable, then its natural counters will have less easy matchups and consequentially will encounter more of their harder matchups. In turn, creating a meta shift that could spread to other roles if the change is substantial enough. So, when it comes to the balancing side of League, I would feel like my personal feelings would get in the way. Changing massive things like the map or how a certain role should be played would have too big of an impact on the main game. But without further ado, let's get into how I would fix League of Legends. I'm closing in on 9 years since I've been playing League of Legends consistently. I personally have gone through many cycles, from being a casual player to a player who plays with his friends only, then a player who's purely competitive, and now a player that tries to seek as much fun as possible while also dabbling in ranked. I feel like I can relate to a lot of the feedback that the community has been giving along the years. So let's start with the casual side of League of Legends and how we can make it better. One of the most common issues that surprisingly isn't talked about enough is how normal games feel like ranked. And not in the sense that people try to win. You can't really blame someone for wanting to win in a game, but players seem to be a bit confused as to what normal games are used for. In order to understand how to fix the casual side of League, we need to understand the game modes that are available to us. There are 4 modes or queues that can take place on the Summoner's Rift map. The normal game that has no cap on the amount of friends that you can play with or how many champions you need to have. It also doesn't have a ban phase and you are free to pick the same champion that you see in the enemy team. Then there is the draft mode that holds a similar feeling to ranked. You have a ban phase, you cannot pick the same champions that are picked by the enemy, and you need a certain amount of champions to be able to play the mode. However, you can still play with up to 4 friends. We also have the solo duo mode, or more commonly known as the solo queue ladder. It holds the same rules as a draft game. However, depending on the outcome of your game, you will gain or lose LP points which indicate your visual rank. There is also a hidden rank, more commonly known as ELO, but we will not get into that. This is the most competitive mode that League of Legends has to offer. You can play with one other person up until you reach the master rank, after which you are forced to play alone if you would like to continue and climb the ladder. There is also a limitation on who you can play with depending on how far apart your visual rank is compared to them. And last but not least, we have Flex Queue. Flex Queue follows the same rules as solo queue, however there are 2 important differences. In Flex Queue, you can play with more than one friend or choose to go alone. As long as you are not exactly 4 people, then you can queue with your friends. The last important difference is that Flex Queue has a completely different ladder than solo queue. And because of that, the rank that one has in Flex Queue is not as highly regarded by the community as the rank that someone has in solo queue. Because playing with friends and practicing team combinations or strategies as a team of 5 will have a massive advantage over those that are pre-made with only 1 or 2 other friends. Now, let's say that you made a new account in League and you have a friend that is trying to teach you, which is the second best case scenario right behind uninstalling after finishing the tutorial. But for the sake of consistency, we will go with this scenario. You would naturally queue up into normal games to try and feel how the game is like. What a lot of people who have more than 2 years of experience fail to realize is that we have a good grasp on all of the champion's abilities and passives. What veterans can also add on to that experience is having a rough estimate on how tanky, squishy, or how much damage each champion can do at what point in the game and with what items. This is the result of hundreds of games against or as a specific champion. This is usually the information that you don't see behind high elo players engaging in a fight that seems unwinnable to you, yet in control and planned to them. And this exact information, coupled with farming, pathing, objective taking, and proper decision making based on circumstances, is what a new player needs to learn about. But you cannot shove 160 plus kits and even more combat scenarios into the head of one new player. Let's not even talk about how hard it is for some people to choose what lane or role they would like to play, or how many different build paths exist for some champions. Nobody wants to get into the game and be faced with knowing how to play against more than 160 champions that each have 4 different abilities and a passive. But if they would still want to try, then the best way would be through the game modes that last a short time and are fun to play. It could either be a PvE game or a non-competitive PvP game like Ascension used to be. Something that can take your mind off jungle pathing and reading where the enemy jungler might be, or how to freeze the lane and learn how to farm on the turret. These things sound like nothing to us, but to newer players it's impossible to do while learning what the champions you are facing can do. Sometimes you need a lot of games facing the same champion in the same situation to know what your limit is. We forgot everything that we had to learn on our ways here, and we are confused about what else we need to learn or what is necessary to get to our level. Normal games need to be a safe place where people can fool around in a completely non-competitive setting or try and learn how to play the game. But currently there are a lot of toxic people that treat normal games as ranked games, blaming the players for being new, for trying a champion on the free rotation for the first time, or the player laning against a new champion for the first time. We treat losing in a normal game as time wasted rather than an opportunity to learn. I'm also of the opinion that eliminating the ban phase and enabling mirror matchups in normal games is not enough for it to be different to a draft. Let's make a bi-weekly or monthly rotation of champions, buffs, gimmicks, items, or restrictions of any kind that makes playing normal League on the basic Summoner Rift map fun. Why does the map always have to be the same? How about a different layout of the map, or a hidden boundary on your lane that specifically buffs a role in order to force solo ADC's lane, and a support with a bruiser, or a lane that forces the appearance of a smite champions on it every 3 minutes. We can add a lot of gimmicks that help new players learn the basics of the game, like last hitting, champion abilities, builds, proper itemization, objectives, into normal games, while also making the experience fun and refreshing for anyone that doesn't want to play a ranked like game mode. Honestly, for veterans who just want to have fun in League, throwing them a bone like this is enough to make them happy. However, this one bone could add a lot of new players into the pool of pre-existing players. After a new player hits a certain threshold of experience, the draft game mode will unlock, upon which if they choose to play that game mode, they will get a complete view into all the systems that are needed for one to know in League. I feel draft has a good place and is mandatory to have. What we should treat draft as is a game mode that closely represents the competitive scene, but in a casual way. It should be the game mode where you shouldn't be afraid to try crazy new builds, strategies, and attempt to polish the skills required for ranked. For our new player, this is their chance to practice freezing, last hitting under tower, jungle patting, tracking the enemy jungler, and so much more. The experience will not match the exact same one in ranked, since people will try new crazy ideas and be a lot more open-minded and risky about their decisions. But in my opinion, draft still sets up a very good foundation that with time will grow more sturdy than ever by playing more games. And our new player can quickly figure out whether or not they would like to pursue this competitive feeling after building their foundation, or choose the path of a casual gamer with no will of competing at a high level. Ranked mode is simply for mastering those mechanics needed to compete. Now, my opinion on ranked might be a bit controversial to some people, but ranked is not something that you should blind pick, try out new champions or crazy builds for the first time. It might seem okay because with ranked resetting way more often now, it doesn't matter if you get stuck. But your hidden MMR doesn't reset that often, and even if it is, it will be a soft reset. Now correct me if I'm wrong, but if you constantly try new roles with new champions and wacky builds with no understanding of how the game is played to begin with, then you will most likely get in a low rank, and it will be way harder for you to get out in the long run. We've gone on a little bit of a tangent here. So after explaining what the modes in League should be used for, let's dive deeper into how we can make it more fun for casual players to play League. We have talked about the few ways to make normal blind pick games more fun. While I don't doubt that making these types of rotational changes is a hard thing, a system being hard to implement is not a good excuse to not implement it. I do believe that while League is a highly competitive game at its core, we underestimate how popular the casual side of League can get. So what if we make a couple of new game modes? I still get a nostalgic feeling when I think about the past and remember the Ascension game mode, and how we used that map in order to play hide and seek. The map was 80% foggy and only a few spots were able to spot players passing by. But I remember we always used to have a few seekers and a bunch of hiders going around the map and trying to run away. The fun part was that the seeker itself couldn't be spotted because the map was super foggy, so when you met him it made you shit your pants. Ever since Ascension was removed, I have been craving a hide and seek like map or mode for a long time, and Summoner's Rift isn't it at all. The map is split in half and you have to pass by open areas in order to get to a different side of the map. Using the same train of thought, Prop Hunt might be fun as well. What about a game mode using similar systems to TFT? TFT is so fun and dynamic because of all the random perks that exist coupled with the RNG part of receiving item parts. A roguelike game mode for League could be super popular, but Riot might be asking themselves, why devote resources to other game modes when the current ones are dying? Well, I'm not sure why they are dying, so Let's take a look. Maybe because Earth has been the same for years? In a super fast game mode with everything having a low cooldown, like items, summoner spells, abilities, the one thing they decided to not give a low cooldown to is death timers. When your brain gets used to the ability to spam and fight every few seconds, there will be obviously times when you die and take a break for a few seconds to process what happened. But when that time gets to 30 and 40 seconds or even 50 seconds in a game mode where champions are unbalanced and you could get one shot at 2 seconds after relief from base, it literally turns a lot of people off from the game mode. Let's imagine this scenario. You decide to pick an average champion in Earth versus amazing champions. That's fine. You somehow make a few outplays, die a few times, but you have a few moments where you might have teleported at the wrong location at the wrong time, or some unfortunate thing happens to you and you die 3 times in a row. That's close to 2 if not almost 3 minutes in a game mode where everything is supposed to happen fast and end fast. There could be times when you are dead more than alive. Throw champion balance out the window because the game mode is supposed to be unbalanced. But what happened to death timers? Anything above 20 seconds is painful. Sure, the game should end at some point, but you should constantly fight and have fun because that's what the game mode is about. Look at Ultimate Spellbook. It was a breath of fresh air. It was amazing the first time it came around. And then it became so stale. We were literally shuffling between 30 to 50 ultis out of 160. And when it came the second time, I don't think there were any meaningful changes done to it so that it feels fresh. One for All has been the same since forever. Can we really not add any type of system to make it feel more dynamic and fresh? Most people already give up in the first 2 minutes if they get an ADC against an assassin. Sometimes it feels like Riot is either working on 10 projects at the same time that will never release, or they have 50 people working on League, and half of them make skins. Why don't we add a tool that at least allows players make their own game modes? If it becomes incredibly popular, add it to an official game mode and reward the author while allowing him to come up with changes and improvements. If the engine doesn't allow us to do that, then how about we move League to a new engine like Wild Rift? It sounds simple, yet a lot of work has to be done about it. I never claimed it was easy, but that was never a good point to not keep improving and advancing. The game is becoming stale. It has been for a long time. The only thing that can change are items and metas, buffing champions, items, removing items, nerfing champions or items, adding new champions or items and quality of life improvements. It doesn't feel like League is moving forward. League feels like it takes a left or a right depending on which road feels and looks better, but it never moves forward. Now, before I go into how I would fix the competitive side of League, I would like to bring up a system that benefits both sides, or an improvement on an already existing system, the report system. It's not surprising that there are a lot of trolls, scripters and toxic players in League, but just as I mentioned in my previous video, Riot doesn't have a way of knowing for sure if someone is intentionally feeding or soft feeding the enemy because they want to win trade, troll their own teammates or because of a bet. But what if we bring back the tribunal? Riot can make a reputation system where people can choose to view clips or spectate games. It would be open to all people and they would receive random reports. After which, depending on their verdict and the verdict of hundreds of other players, a decision will be made, and in the beginning it could be reviewed by Riot. After which, if the verdict was correct, they would receive reputation or reputation would be taken away if it wasn't. But we need to perfect this system. First of all, we as players should be able to have a report button in the game and be able to click it. After which, a bookmark will be placed to let Riot or the other player reviewers know where they should investigate more. The player reviewers could see these bookmarks, and after reaching a conclusion, after obviously watching the entire game or a specific part, they can send a verdict with a detailed explanation to Riot. This system is very complicated and risky by itself. It could be restricted only to Grandmasters and above. As Rioters themselves explained, there are way too many reports and there are only so many they can handle a day. My hope that a system similar to this can help with the influx of reports. And while I believe that there are some things that writers will not understand in our reports based on videos, things like soft trolling or purposely ending, that is why I believe that a system where Grandmaster Plus players are allowed to view cases like soft ending or feeding and send their own feedback to Riot in order to review would benefit the game greatly for both casual and competitive players. In my opinion, a writer should be way more open when it comes to handing out permanent or long bans. I'm sure we all have seen a player who decides from the early stages of the game that based on one decision that a particular individual has made, he will stop playing and try his best to lose. Or someone who decides to make this game as hard and unwinnable as possible just because he hates the fact that you were the reason that he lost yesterday. My opinion on this might be heavily influenced by personal bias and morals. However, hear me out. If a player doesn't want to play the game anymore, Riot should do him a favor and pull the plug for him. Whether it's a 1-day ban, 7-day ban, 1-month ban, or permanent. There's absolutely no reason as to why a player who openly types in chat "GG I go troll" and proceeds to do just that should be allowed to have access to that account anymore for at least a few weeks, if not permanently. I think Riot is not strict enough to give out bans. You sometimes have to pull out the root to get rid of the weeds. Same with toxic players. Now, let's get into how I would fix the competitive side of League. If there is one thing all League players can relate to, is the hate for specific champions. It could be a champion that we just don't want to personally deal with, a champion that we don't think our team can possibly deal with. Maybe a champion that has a straight up annoying kid. Or maybe you want to ban that one guy that plays Yorick in Challenger Elo. There are also times when a champion is bugged, or a specific build is absolutely broken and the win rate on that champion is inflated. Point is, the ban system is necessary, but we have more than 160 champions. 10 of them are banned, and 10 of them are picked by the teams, which leaves 130 champions still open. Champions are going to keep on coming. It will be at a slower pace, but they won't stop anytime soon. Even when it comes to pro players playing on the stage, there are a few metas that feel stagnant. We need more than 10 bans at the very least. Not only would it benefit the pro players and viewers, but also the competitive rank grinder. And one last thing that really needs to be addressed is how you should definitely disable new champions from ranked, at least for the first 2 weeks. A moment ago we just talked about a system that would benefit the League community for players that are Grandmaster and above. And there is another one that I would like to bring up to the discussion. League in it of itself is a team competitive game. At least that's what we get when we watch Worlds. There is a feeling of euphoria in the air whenever an important teamfight breaks out from seemingly nowhere. But it's not really all that random. It takes communication and planning for a team who's behind in gold to win. But the type of League that is played in solo queue feels like night and day compared to the one in pro play. Here is where that system comes in. In order for more people to realistically feel how League should be played when communication is at its best, we need to allow voice chat in Masters and above. Now, you might be asking yourself how such a feat is possible when a lot of the time there are a few diamond players sprinkled into your game. Well, it doesn't have to be tied to your visible rank. It can be tied to your MMR, and when you're into what League can consider a high MMR game, the feature is enabled. This feature might be used for trolling purposes or chat spamming, and I can see that happening at the end of the day. There can also be players who just don't wish to communicate and feel like there is enough time to type in their strategies or upcoming plans. But we ignore the players who genuinely want to communicate and strive for a teamwork-like feeling out of a game that is meant to have teamwork. Toxicity is not an excuse for this system to not be implemented. Especially if you can report a player in the middle of the game and Ryan can spot the minute you have reported that player in, the reason why, and then review the past few seconds or minutes to see if it warrants a ban or not. There is always a mute button for those types of players as well, along with the report button. And the reason why I wish for it to be restricted to a certain MMR threshold is because I feel like players need to learn champions, including their own, to a high degree and also gather a wide variety of knowledge about how the game is supposed to be played. The moment you have the skills, knowledge or strategies to reach a certain rank, you more than likely have proven yourself that you deserve to rank higher if you can improve your team play. League is all about learning skills to improve yourself first, and then learning skills that will help you improve your teamwork second. And I think that it's time we put more into learning how important and useful teamwork skills can really be in League. I mean, we have already reached some insane strategies and mind reading when it comes to playing with new teammates. Imagine what those exact players can do when they don't have to necessarily use only pings to communicate intentions. This video was important to me. I have been playing the game since I was a child, and I've always had a lot of views throughout the years on how to make this game more fun for me and my friends. At the end of the day, we play games for 3 reasons: having fun, relieving stress, or scratching that competitive feeling. I hope that in this video I managed to properly explain how the players that play for either one of these reasons can enjoy League way more than they do now. And if you have any other opinions, or you think my personal take wouldn't benefit League to the extent I think it would, then feel free to drop a comment and explain your thought process, because I feel like I could genuinely go hours talking about this subject in greater detail. Thank you for watching this far, and don't forget to like and subscribe if you're curious on how I would fix other games. On an ending note, I would like to ask you, the viewer, how would you fix League of Legends?